Recording in progress.
Good evening. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Board of Finance for Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024 to order. We have 3 items on the agenda this evening. 2 of them are public forum. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with public forum prior to discussions and taking possible action on the revision to the proposed fiscal year 2024-2025 budget. With that, I would just, as kind of a reminder, if you would like to make any comments in public forum, name and address for the record, as well as keeping your comments as much as possible to 3 minutes or less. Anybody who's on Zoom, you will be muted, and if you do want to speak virtually, please raise your virtual hand. Otherwise, we will entertain real hands in this audience. And if you do want to make any comments in public forum, we ask that you please come up to the chair up here with the microphone so we can pick you up based both on the audio, on the video camera, as well as on Zoom. And please, we sometimes have some issues with the speaking and audio in this room, so please project your voice if you would like to speak. We will try to remember to do the same. And Veronica, is Veronica already saying that I need to speak up?
Yeah, she is.
Okay. I don't know if I could speak up any more than I am without blowing everybody out of the room. So, but why don't we begin public forum? Anybody wishing to address the Board of Finance in public forum? Please come on. Sir, in the, okay.
Hey, Joe.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Dave Holman. I live at 6 Sparrow Bush Lane. On April 16th, just 1 week ago, the taxpayers in Guilford delivered a strong message when the proposed Guilford 2024-2025 budget was soundly defeated at a referendum by a vote of 1,688 to 1,300. The significance of this vote should not be underestimated, considering that all 5 Guilford voting districts voted down the proposed budget. The message was clear, namely that the hardworking taxpayers in Guilford are getting crushed by out-of-control inflation and an onerous property revaluation last year that and cannot afford another 4.5% unnecessary property tax increase. You may ask, what was unnecessary in the 2024-2025 proposed budget? Let me give you just one example. Included in the proposed budget was an increase in the operating budget for the Guilford General Town Government of $1,372,517. This increase was totally unnecessary when you consider that the Guilford Board of Selectmen meeting on March 18th, the Guilford Finance Director announced that the town of Guilford would be receiving $953,000 in unanticipated, unallocated, and unbudgeted grants from the state of Connecticut. Also at this meeting, Guilford First Selectman Matt Hoey announced that the town had $1.1 million left in unallocated ARPA funds. During this meeting, the Board of Selectmen voted to use $576,900 of these ARPA funds to finance the additional money needed to construct a 2-bay addition to the Guilford Firehouse. But that still leaves $523,100 in unallocated Guilford ARPA funds. If you add this $523,100 to the $953,000 in state grants, you get $1,476,100 in available funds, which is more than the $1,372,517 proposed increase in the Guilford Town Government operating budget. To be clear, this money, this $1,476,100 of available state grant and ARPA funds should be used to cover the entire $1,372,517 requested increase in the Guilford General Town Government budget. Why ask the hardworking Guilford taxpayers to endure another tax increase but to pay for this unnecessarily? 4 to 5% tax increases every year are punitive, unsustainable, and irresponsible. The members of the Guilford Board of Finance must exhibit fiscal restraint and be respectful of and responsible to the hardworking taxpayers and businesses in Guilford.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kendall Svengalis, 3 Rockland Road. As members of the Finance Committee, you need to be focused on the impact that rising taxes have on those most adversely affected, including those who are retired and on fixed incomes. The compounding of 4 to 5% increases every year will eventually make it difficult, if not impossible, for many residents to remain here. The local teachers union, like the national NEA, is always crying poverty. Yet teachers' salaries in Connecticut are the 5th highest in the nation. Under this budget, the average teacher's salary will rise from $89,600 to $94,000 for a part-time job. And now they enjoy a student-teacher ratio that has plummeted over the last several decades from 28 to 1 to 12 to 1 versus a national average of 17 to 1. We spend over $24,000 per student versus a national average of $12,000. Clearly, the teachers union has historically had an outsized role in the education budget. That role should be shifted back to the taxpayers where it belongs. The student population, in addition, has fallen 10% since 2017, yet costs keep rising. But what have we gotten for these high salaries and low class sizes? Of the 3,100 students enrolled, roughly, 775 students, or 25%, are not proficient in reading, and 1,116, or 36%, are not proficient in math, according to state test scores, as reported by Niche. This spreadsheet, and I'll provide a copy for you, pass those down. This spreadsheet provides these figures by school. These figures are markedly higher than the prior year when 430, or 14%, were not proficient in reading, and 738, or 24%, were not proficient in math. A blue ribbon school system does not have 1/4 of its students not reading proficiently and more than 1/3 of them not doing math proficiently. This is because the schools have lost focus and have been wasting precious class time on politicized agendas, DEI, CRT, equity and social justice, gender issues, and the like, instead of academics. And over the last year, we now get an off-the-shelf program called Portrait of a Graduate that is made up of 6 amorphous woke competencies, the success of which cannot be quantified. Nor is there anything in this about proficiency in reading, writing, math, science, technology, civics, and so forth. Not surprisingly, Niche calculates that only 43% of Guilford High School students are ready for college. In short, we're not getting a good return on our investment. And until our student test scores and college readiness improve, we should think twice about spending more money on the education budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi. John Phelan, 323 North River Street, Guilford. I decided to take a look at the Madison Board of Education budget just to kind of compare where similar towns in demographics, social economic conditions. The Board of Education budget for 24-25 is $63,645,000. $63,645,000, about a 3.03 increase from the previous year. And this includes $240,000 reduction in by the Board of Madison Board of Finance. The Madison school budget increases for fiscal year 23-24 was 2.52. 23 was 1.66. 21-22, 1.23, 20-21, 0.67, and 2019-20, negative 0.10. for an average increase over the last 5 years of 1.24. The Madison proposed school budget for increase for 24-25 is 3.41 compared to Guilford 5.08. So if the Board of Finance had approved a Guilford school budget of 3.41%, the proposed budget would have been approximately 1.5 million less, lower than it is this year. So the budget by the Board of Finance, the budget was reduced by 200,000, which is 0.3% reduction. So I think we can do a little bit more and without cutting the muscle. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Judith Andrews. I live at 200 Boston Post Road. Good evening. Why do we think that the Guilford Town and Education budget, as proposed for the year...
You may need to speak up a little bit so that people on Zoom can hear you. So just-
All right,
just so you know, so they
I'll
can
begin
hear you.
again. Thank you
I can hear you.
very much.
Don't touch that mic, this is for me.
Okay. Oh,
Thank you. I just want to make sure everyone can hear you, that's all.
thank you very much. Why do we think that the Guilford Town and Education budget, as proposed for the new year, 2024 to 2025, is unrealistic? Because it is. Absent from this budget is the common sense that would have prevented such an inflated proposal in a time of hardship for many taxpayers in town. In contrast, the proposal for the City of Hartford reflects the good sense of city officials. Officials there have eliminated 387 positions from the Department of Education. These cuts include 156 teaching positions, 158 administrative positions, 67 positions at the central office, and 34 direct school service positions that employ instructional coaches, school nurses, school psychologists, and speech and language specialists. In Hartford, many of these employees were paid with ARPA and ESSER funds, which will expire this year. These funds were never intended to cover permanent staff positions. These positions have been discontinued. On the other hand, the town of Guilford has used its ARPA and ESSER funds to pay for at least 12 full-time employees in the Guilford Public Schools. These 12 positions and any other positions funded by ARPA and ESSER funds should be immediately eliminated from the proposed 2024 to 2025 Guilford Town and Education budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh,
Good evening, and thank you for having me. My name is Peter Connell. I live at 16 Riverside Court since 1984. My understanding is that 73% of the proposed education budget increase will be or go to salaries. During the Guilford Board of Education election campaign of 2021, the Guilford Education Association asked each of the candidates to answer a candidate questionnaire, which included the following question. Will you pledge to include the local teachers union in discussions surrounding all matters related to your local school district, its schools, and its funding? Each of the 5 Democratic and Independent candidates and current members of the Guilford Board of Education answered yes to that question. And my question is, why is the teachers union involved in the school's budget? Does this have anything to do with the 73% of the proposed increases going toward salaries? Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am. Oh.
Evie?
Hi. Debbie Demusis, 18 Sugarloaf Road, Guilford, Connecticut. So I'd like you to know where I got this information before I start. The following facts were taken from Connecticut.gov ed site and the U.S. News. Both these sites can be found online. This information was gathered April 1st, 2024. This is a comparison of schools in Connecticut that are similar in size to Guilford High School. There are 2 outliners only in student population. So as I read it, please notice that the Farmington School District is rated number 5, and they spend less than Guilford per student, almost $1,400, and have a college readiness of 69.2%. Please note that. College readiness rate 26% higher than Guilford. Guilford is rated number 29, and Connecticut spends the most per pupil in this comparison and has the lowest college readiness of 43%. One other school rated number 31 spends $4,298 less per pupil. Their college readiness rate is 49.06% points higher than Guilford. Guilford Public Schools need to meet the needs of the average student. We are paying for a combined number of 12 math and literacy coaches. What is the purpose of these math and literacy coaches when Guilford Public Schools have 775 students who are not proficient in math and 1,116 students who are not proficient in reading? The children in Guilford and the parents in Guilford deserve to get a better return on their investment for our education system. There needs to be a correction in our education system, and our leaders in Board of Education need to focus on educating our children in the basics instead of focus on equity. There should be a focus on meritocracy. Parents, I don't need that, but I'd like to now go over the Connecticut school rankings. So number 5, Farmington School has 1,264 students, and their college readiness is 69.2. Simsbury is number 14. They have 1,274 students. Their college readiness is 54%. Avon Schools, number 16, they have 955 students, and their college readiness is 54.5%. Granby School District, number 18, they are an outlier. They have 574 students, but they have a 56.3 college readiness percent. Trumbull School District, number 19, they have 2,139 students. They have a 48.9 college readiness percent. Glastonbury is number 23. They have a student count of 1,862. Their college readiness is 56.3. Guilford School District, number 29. We have 1,089 students. We have the lowest college readiness rate at 43%. Number 30, Cheshire School District, 1,313 students. They have a 48.8 college readiness percent. Number 31, South Windsor School District, 1,281 students. They have a 49% college readiness rate. Number 34, East Lyme School District, they have 970 students, and they have a 50.8% college rate. I've been here 43 years. I've had 3 children go through the system. They've all got a very good education. Guilford was probably in the top 10% in U.S. News at that point, and they relied on the basics. They got a good education, and they came out of here very well educated, and they're very successful now.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the Board of Finance? Virtually? Or in person? Okay, before I close public forum, I want to make sure it's absolutely clear to everybody, both on Zoom, virtually, and in the audience, that this is a discussion of the Board of Finance with possible elected officials. This is not a town meeting. There is not going to be any public discussion after this. There is no back and forth. This is a discussion that the Board of Finance needs to have, possibly ask questions of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education, if needed, and have a discussion amongst ourselves about where we're going. We do thank you for all of your public forum. We will allow you to have public forum at the end of this meeting, after hopefully a discussion and possible action take place. But I want to make sure there will be no back and forth. That is not the way this meeting is going to go, and that's the way it usually is in our Board of Finance meetings, unless there's public forum before and after, which there is. So, with that, anybody else? Okay. Item number 2, discuss and take possible action on revision to the proposed fiscal year 2024-2025 budget.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I could for a moment.
Yes.
For those in the room, I'm an ex-officio member, so I can have
Conversations. with the board.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
There were a lot of numbers thrown around over the last 10 or 15 minutes, and I just want to try to focus in on a couple of them. I think I heard twice that we have had a 4.5% tax increase proposed for the last budget. Wrong. It was 3.87. Someone said they've been compounding tax rates of 4.5% over the years. Let me just read you a couple of numbers. The 1920 budget carried a 2.4% tax increase against a CPI of 2.9. 2021 carried a 0.87 tax increase against a CPI of 1.1. 21-22, a 0.96% tax increase against the CPI of 5.4. 2022-23, a 1.93% tax increase against the CPI of 8.5%. In 23-24, when you adjust out the effects of reval, we had a 2.25% tax increase against the 3.2% CPI. I don't see how that adds up to compounding 4.5%. So I think those are misrepresentations in some form or fashion. Numbers don't lie.
Well, you're kind of stealing some of my thunder here because I had a whole bunch of prepared comments, but anything else you'd like to say?
That's it for me. Thank you.
That's it for you?
For now.
No, there will not be
Pardon me,
any
John?
public forum.
No,
It is,
just me over here.
no, you're fine, you're on the board.
Can I just ask a question about that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, I kind of noticed, and I thought the total budget increase was 3.875, I think it was. But I was curious, are they looking at the operating budgets? Because if you...
No, that's the tax increase, Jonathan.
Oh, you're looking at the tax increase. Okay, but
Straight up
I
tax
think they might have
increase.
been looking at the spending increase.
Straight up tax increase.
You look at the operating budgets between the school and the town, excluding debt, I think it's more like a 4.7% increase.
So if you believe me or the documents that have been shared with you, you agree 3.87% is the tax
For the
increase
total,
proposed?
absolutely. Absolutely. for
Did
the
you
total.
object, did you object to the publication of 4.5% tax increases?
I didn't publish anything to
Okay.
that effect.
Just-
But did you
Okay.
share that information?
Okay, you know what, I'm gonna,
No.
I would like to read the comments I have as Chair of the Board of Finance. Sorry to cut you short, but I think this will answer and address some of the issues that have been on my mind since Tuesday. And I will then allow any Board of Finance members, if they'd like to add, refute any comments. As you all know, the Board of Finance is holding this special meeting tonight to review proposed changes to the fiscal year 24-25 budget to resend to voters based on the budget not passing by a 400 vote margin. And I would note that the bond question requested by the Board of Education did pass. Before we begin tonight's discussions formally, I want to take a moment to address several concerns and questions that have been raised by our community over the past few weeks before and after the budget referendum that was held on April 16th. Though we may all have our opinions on why the budget did not pass, and I personally believe that there were several reasons for the budget not passing, I want to focus on those reasons that seemed to garner more attention than others before the referendum vote occurred, whether in meetings I have attended, individuals I have spoken to directly, email I have received, and social media platforms, most notably on Facebook. In a few moments, as I said, I will allow the Board of Finance members to have any other opinions or reasons, but I wanted to state a few first. First one, means of communication on this budget. It does seem to me that there will likely never be consensus on how to get the word out to the public. Since serving on this board for 17 years, I could go through years of debate on why this way, and why that way, and why not this way, and why not that way. And people complain that the low turnout is because of not notifying taxpayers a certain way. There are more ways than ever to be notified than just a sign on the green and a notice in the local paper with the budget in it. There's text messaging, there's social media, there's mass notification, just to name a few. And we vote on the budget the same time every year. So I'm asking you all now, place a recurring notification in your calendar on April 1st for the exact date of the budget referendum that year. Second, and I do feel very strongly I need to say this, there was a great deal of animosity and ill will prior to the referendum that resulted at and from the town meeting on April 2nd. Despite the meeting following strict procedural protocol dictated by the town charter. There were votes taken and public comment was heard, but unfortunately many in the audience were rude and out of order by many individuals that may not have appeared to understand the process. The moderator went beyond fair in calling for visual vote by counters on nearly every motion. Some of them were clearly understood on which way the vote would go. But the tone was negative and bitter based on yelling and pointing fingers at those trying to lead the meeting. I sincerely hope that the discussion at the next town meeting, which is date to be determined, is more civil and respectful between our community and neighbors despite disagreement and opinion. What we saw and I saw on April 2nd is not the way the Guilford community behaves. Third, it is understood and also unfortunate that many household property taxes went up last year by double digits due to the revaluation in 2022. When the grand list goes up by nearly 30%, which it did, and a property value goes up more than that percentage, there is a stronger possibility than not that a tax increase will result, even had we kept the budget increases low or flat. Obviously, for many, the increase last year, though not a direct result of budget increases, compounded the decision by many voters this time around, and that is understood. Fourth, it came to my attention that a text was sent by those opposing the proposed budget regarding school staff average salaries, specifically of 22 positions, including assistant principals, certified administrators, and non-certified administrators. And I'm not going to read it, but I have the text in front of me. But it claimed of average salaries of $194,000 and $224,000. According to the response received by the Board of Education from questions posed by the Board of Finance and Board of Education, there are 19 Board of Education admin positions over $100,000. 2 are over $200,000. One of which is a superintendent who makes a salary comparable to all other superintendent salaries in our DRG, district reference group. Simply removing the superintendent from the average salary of the administrative positions questioned is 17% less, or $166,000. I have no idea how these numbers were arrived at in the text that was sent, but I hope that the numbers confirmed by the Board of Education during our budget and proceedings were not shared, skewed, reviewed, and/or approved by any member of this board. Fifth, there has been much discussion about the $953,000 worth of grants received by the town in March. To be clear and transparent, the town received 3 unbudgeted one-time revenues from the state to be applied to fiscal year 23-24. $253,000 for motor vehicle transition due to the year that our mill rate was over the cap. Our mill rate is no longer over that cap, so we will not be receiving that revenue in the near future, and there's no budget in the fiscal year 25 for that grant. $558,000 for unbudgeted sales tax diversion grant. The governor has proposed eliminating it, and so it has not been budgeted for fiscal year 2025. And $160,000 was received in additional revenue sharing grant funds not anticipated nor budgeted for the fiscal year 2025. The amount of these grants received totaled $953,000 in unbudgeted, unanticipated revenue from the state for fiscal year 2024. None of this revenue is anticipated nor budgeted in fiscal year 2025. As one-time sources, if we were to assume that the 953 eventually falls into our unassigned fund balance next year, and then we apply it in this fiscal year 24-25 as a $953,000 revenue source as a tax offset, we will need to find nearly $1 million in revenue for the fiscal year 25-26 budget. And that's a lot of money to have to find for short-term use. Sixth, I know there is a contingent of voters that have tied the pending location of the App Foundation in Guilford to this vote to send a message to the town. To be clear, there is no direct effect of a no vote on this budget to the placement and future opening of the App Foundation in Guilford. Voting against this budget because of the App Foundation is simply hurting our seniors, our students, our families, and our community. Opinions can be voiced about the App Foundation, but the budget should not be a pawn in the process. And finally, I'm drying out. I need to clarify and correct those who spoke about and place signs, as was just alluded to, around the town stating a 4.5% tax increase. When the budget went to vote on April 16th, the mill rate or tax increase was projected, and I had 3.76%. Those signs indicating 4.5%, it was never a number we saw as a board. The initial combined budget increase that came to the Board of Finance was 4.25%, and the tax increase was 4.32%. However, the Board of Finance reduced the budget $300,000 and anticipated $300,000 in additional non-tax revenue to get the tax increase to 3.76%. It is absolutely unconscionable that fictitious numbers were stated and posted all over town before the referendum by a rogue group of individuals not organized or registered as a political entity, and any member of this board who was aware of these incorrect numbers being posted all around town should have refuted and rejected that effort. At this time, I would like to seek any other initial comments before we go into discussions about any reductions in the budget from my colleagues. Thank you.
Yeah, I have some comments.
Sure.
So, first of all, I think that you're kind of splitting hairs that some residents thought the increase was 4.5. If you look at the operating budget increases for the town
It's a whole number.
and for the.
It's a whole
Well,
four in the front.
Just
and a
allow
three-
me a comment,
Okay,
if you would, sir.
splitting hairs, okay.
So, I think they saw that between the two operating budgets, if you excluded debt, that the spending did increase by about 4.7%. So you can split hairs about a couple of tenths that somebody got wrong on a sign, that's fine. But I think what you have in Guilford is real problems. I mean, I'm getting some feedback from voters, and voters are telling me that the government's out of touch. One person or two said they have no idea what it's like to buy gas or groceries. Dozens of people are telling me school enrollment is down, yet the school budget is up. They're saying that the town workers are getting raises that are way above inflation, sometimes 3-4 times above inflation. The private sector is struggling to have a standard of living that's above inflation. They're struggling with inflation every day. And I'll tell you another thing. There was a common thread of dozens of people who talked to me. They're afraid to say their name. They're afraid to come up in a meeting. They're afraid they're going to be pushed aside and maybe silenced. They're afraid they're going to be ostracized or mistreated by town workers or employees. And I'm telling you, there was 802 new voters from last time around, and 769 of them voted against this budget. And if you think it's because the sign was off by 2/10, I can tell you, my friend, that that's not true.
And I will say that's not the only reason also, as I stated in my comments. That's just one reason of many.
Yep. And then I would like to speak to this one-time budget revenue. I mean, I can understand that that's true, that we may not get the same money back next year for these state grants. But you have to recognize that there's almost always a surplus. In the last 5 years, I think we dealt with 3 surpluses, and I've always voted to give the taxpayers back the surplus. And then another thing to recognize is that the government has sort of thrown out this one-time revenue view when it comes to ESSER and ARPA grant money. I mean, they're just hiring people full-time who are on ESSER or ARPA, and now those are going to be in the budget, and that source of revenue is gone. That's going to dry up. So I just wanted to speak to those 2 items because I don't feel it's wrong to give taxpayers a break when we get unexpected surplus. I think it's reasonable. You know, sometimes the town doesn't budget correctly. I think in 1 year we had $2 million surplus in our medical fund. Sometimes that happens. It's not a bad thing to give that back to taxpayers. Taxpayers are struggling.
Mr. Chairman, could I correct the record once again? 4.5% is not a number that appeared on any documentation that you had, Jonathan. The total increase in the expenditure budget for both the town, the Board of Education, and capital and debt service was a 3.98% increase. I'm not sure that that equals 4.5%. Pretty sure it doesn't. The documentation that you had showed 3.98%, not 4.5%.
Does that exclude the debt servicing?
No, it
part of the budget?
includes it all.
Oh, it includes it,
includes
okay.
everything. Our budget increase was 3.
Understood. If you include debt, I understand. It's 3.875, I believe. I had the number correct.
It's one budget we vote on, remember?
Other board members, comments, thoughts?
I would like to actually agree with Jonathan on one point. And I'm actually curious, would the $953,000 revenue, would that have been part of the budget, or any piece of that have been part of the budget had you known what year the state would have given it to the town?
Yes.
Yes. So why are we not putting it into the budget now that we know it's here? The interest income is something that is not guaranteed for next year. The ARPA funds, as you said, it's a one-time, like, why are we not using this money? We didn't know about it when the budget was first put out, so we couldn't use it then, but we know about it now.
Well, it's an offset to the budget year that we're in right now.
Have we spent it all in this year?
Well, Mary Jane?
The funds will most likely fall to fund balance as a surplus.
So we can use that surplus against
It-
next year's budget?
It would be a transfer from fund balance. It would be a revenue from fund balance if you were to use it. So you would have to add that revenue line into your budget. And to the chair's point, in the following year, we'd have a $958,000 shortfall in that year.
That's true. But had we built the budget with that revenue, we would be using it next year, we'd be spending it next year, we'd be offsetting expenses next year.
You just have a bigger increase the
We
following
actually,
year.
we actually
understand
can't,
that.
we actually can't use the revenue we're receiving this year for next year until it falls to fund balance.
But we can plan and say, hey, there's going to be money in the fund balance, which we have plenty of money in, we have that amount in the fund balance right now,
We do.
so,
It is true, yes.
yeah.
And to just go to my point, yes, we could use $953,000 and then next year we gotta figure out where we're gonna, so, you know, if it's using 953,
You're just
for
kicking that.
for this particular, you know, fiscal year 24, 25 budget, and we use that to offset, great. And then, okay, so where's everyone gonna be next year when everything goes up $1 million? There's $1 million that we have to find that we don't have because those grants aren't, it is literally.
I completely
it's-
understand that.
yeah.
I definitely understand that. But when does it get spent? And I know that, you know, there are things that it offsets and whatnot, but the taxpayers have asked us to reduce
Right.
what they're paying,
Right.
and we have this incredible opportunity. Maybe it's one time, but a lot can change in a year, up or down. You know, we might be having the same conversation next year, and we're saying, hey, we really have to slash all these things. But this year, we have a rare opportunity to actually decrease the tax increase and not cut the services.
But I guess, but then you're gonna be cutting the services extremely next year, because you're not gonna have ARPA, you're not gonna have that, and then you have a biennium state budget that will be very difficult, because they didn't even amend the budget this year. And so you're gonna go into a budget year where you're competing against 169 other towns for that state revenue. I would imagine that the school revenue that we get, the cost sharing grant, is gonna go down. So then you're gonna have to you can do it, you're just gonna dig yourself into a very big hole. And then that increase is, yes, you'll save people this year, but then that increase will probably be above 5% next year.
So, yeah.
It's, Amy, it's worth the discussion.
Yeah.
It's
That's
worth a
why,
discussion.
that's why we brought it up.
I
That's why I
know.
brought it up, so
Yep,
It's
I
worth
fully
a
understand.
discussion. I just
Absolutely.
think it's
Hand
a
out
longer term game than just today. Because I think then you put people in a really hard position next year, knowing that all those sources of revenue are gonna go away, knowing that the state budget is not guaranteed, and that everybody knows that budget, whether you're a town or a nonprofit or a private company, everybody knows going into next year's budget that it's like all bets are off, because it's very rare that the state does not amend a biennium budget. And there's fiscal guardrails, so they have a spending cap. So I'm just kind of trying to give the bigger picture of what's going on. I'm not saying we shouldn't do either or. I'm just saying if we do this, we need to know that next year is going to be much different.
Megan, can I ask you a question about that? Honestly, just take it down a notch. But
Yeah.
like, you feel so strongly about the one-time revenue source, but what about the ARPA funds and hiring people full-time? I mean, you don't seem to have the same distress about that.
I think that we've done a really good job. I mean, I've seen other cities and towns that, yeah, they're laying off 100+ teachers. I think Hartford was an example of that. The only reason they're doing that, it's not because they don't need the teachers, it's because they budgeted on just ARPA funds. So now they're cutting all their teachers and they're leaving their students without anybody to teach. And I mean, with all due respect, Hartford is a great city, but it's not one of the top schools in the state. And there's a lot of reasons for that outside of just teacher shortages.
But I mean, it's okay to take the one-time revenue source of ARPA or ESSER and hire people permanently
I'm
and
not-
stick the taxpayer
but
with
we
that
didn't
when
do
the
that.
revenue's.
We didn't use it
Not
nearly as
gonna
much
be-
as a
didn't-
Hartford or Bridgeport.
We didn't do that in
Some of the
this.
bigger urban
Yeah,
centers did.
I
We did
mean,
not use it nearly
credit
that
to
percentage.
the Board of Ed and Dr. Freeman, they didn't do that with the funds.
I think you're missing my point. The ARPA and ESSER money was not a continuous stream of revenue. It had a termination date. But you have no problem that we kept people on and hired them permanently, even though that revenue source dried up. But here, the possibility of taking $1 million, giving the taxpayer a break, you're like, oh, we'll be $1 million in the hole next year.
Well, so from my understanding of going, you've gone through the same budget process that I've gone through over the last several years.
Maybe,
I think we've
with
been
a
at
little
the
bit
same
different
meetings.
outlook.
But we have planned for those positions over a period of time, right? So those positions that were, as you're saying, were funded through ARPA initially, then they were built into budgets over several years. So we're not impacted.
Did we not recognize that the ARPA and ESSER grant was temporary?
I think we've always known it's temporary, but I think the town of Guilford has taken the stance of planning for it longer term so that you're not dealing with what Hartford or other cities are dealing with, that they're laying people off. We've built it in over time. A lot of those positions that we've talked about on this board and with the Board of Education, for those that don't know, we have joint meetings. That's been over the last several years. It hasn't just been all this year.
Right.
So
Okay.
I do want to address the
I get your point.
misinformation though, because
Yep.
I think it's impact, so I know we talked about the 4.5%. I do just want to say that I don't know who shared that information or spread that information, but it did really impact, I think, the trust that people have in the Board of Finance members too. So I want to put that out there. I know I didn't share that, but I got questions about it, and I do think it's irresponsible to send out information when you're a part of this whole process. And not only is it
Are
going
you
to...
accusing me? Just accusing
No,
me?
I'm just saying whoever did it, I think whoever did it, I don't think understands that then it impacts the credibility and the trust that people have in the Board of Finance members that are then out there in the public trying to explain that that's not really true and that this is the number, and it's very hard to
Yeah,
combat that.
and I actually recognize and sympathize that it should be 4% on the total budget. But I also think people could easily be confused by looking at just the operating budgets.
But I don't know why that would have ever been the case, because we've never been looking at that.
Well, the operating budget is the increase in spending.
But we've never been looking at that. It is what it is.
Well,
I think-
some people look at it.
Right.
I'd like to recognize the Chair of the Board of Education, Dr. Katie Balstracy. You had your hand up, so.
I did. I just want to make one clarification. That when the Guilford Public Schools did receive ESSER monies, as per required, the administration took great care, loud?
Yeah, louder, yeah.
Took great care to consider what those monies were spent on. And they were spent on a couple of positions, mostly not spent on people at all. But I just want to clarify one point. We did not hire permanent people or permanent positions with those monies. What we did was hire some people during a global pandemic that we thought would be needed and valuable to support kids during a pandemic. And as the years continued, made decisions every year to assess whether we needed to keep those positions, because one of the things that has become quite clear here in Guilford and nationally is that 2 years later, we took off masks, but the impact of this pandemic on kids, on their learning and on their mental health, among other things, was big. And so we have made purposeful decisions to keep positions that, the few positions that ESSER funds were used for because of current need at that moment. So not only, and I thank Board of Finance member Megan Scanlon, not only was there an incredibly thoughtful approach to the use of those ESSER funds, but they were not the people hired were not necessarily for long-term, but it became apparent that the continued need required that we keep them. Thank you.
It's actually a bit of a segue, that something I wanted to bring up because there were some numbers that were put out before. And I just want to make sure for those that haven't been following the last 8 years of Board of Education budgets, seems to be a lot of focus this year on the increase. And I want to remind those, not just on this board, which we all should know, but those in the audience, that from fiscal year 17 to fiscal year 22, that's a 6-year period, the Board of Education increases were 0.69, 1.8, I'm sorry, this is all percent, 0.69, 1.28, 1.44, 1.77, 1.61, and 1.41. Now, if you go the last 8 years of fiscal years, they've all been under the cost of living and under the US inflation rate for the year. Except for one, I'm sorry, which was 2021, 2022, which missed it by 0.01%. It was 1.41. So one of the things that I continue to hear over the last couple of years, and especially this year, is that there's catch-up. And yeah, it wasn't that hard for any budget to be presented in the last 2 years, not this year, but the last 2 years, and be under the cost of living and under US inflation. Okay, we all know they were high. In fact, the numbers were respectively in the last 2 years, 6.5 on inflation, 7, and cost of living was 8.7 and 5.9 the year before. So listen, the numbers were high. But another thing that I think we hear is, and we heard it again tonight, people can't afford their fuel, they can't afford their food, they can't afford their utilities, they can't afford a whole number of things, which is difficult. Inflation doesn't just hit our pockets. It doesn't just hit our gas tanks. It doesn't hit our oil tanks and our grocery shopping. If anybody thinks the town and the Board of Education are shielded from that, and oh well, they don't have fuel to buy for buses, and they don't have utilities, and they don't. It goes up for everybody. So, I hear that argument, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. I know it's tough for all of us, and the last couple of years have been pretty tough. Now we're looking at, an inflation of 3.4 and COLA of 3.2. So honestly, you start looking at those numbers and say, well, thank God they came down. Well, let's see if we can get under that. Let's see if we could get under that a ninth year in a row. And that, I think, is fair, and that's what the Board of Finance is trying to do. We're trying to balance what the taxpayers are saying to us, and it was spoken this year. We all heard it. But at the same time, devastating cuts are not going to do anybody any favors, and especially when we've been going through this process, not just in the last, since the budget, but we've been going through it in January with the TAP, all the way back to October with the Board of Education, looking at these numbers, knowing what's in them. Now the question is, what are we going to do in terms of the reduction to balance that? And it is not an easy task to do. It's the first time as chair that I've had to do it. And I'm like, when Matt was chair, I was like, thank God he's chair. But at this particular moment, there's 7 of us, and Veronica, you're on virtually, joining us on vacation, and we're going to pound this out and try to figure out what we're going to do. So I wanted to make sure that came out about the numbers, because I think it's very pertinent to the discussion of where we're going to eventually go. I had a number of other notes. There was, I don't want to reiterate I am going to say something. We talked about what the tax increase would have been had the budget passed. The total budget would have been, that's school and town, it would have been a 3.98% increase. This is where we are now. What we're looking at, the town budget increase was 2.77. The Board of Ed budget reflected a 4.79% increase. And all the Board of Finance members know that when we first went to referendum, let me go back. When we first sent a budget out, was it March 7th, when we made a decision of what to send to the voters? There was a town meeting, then there was a budget. We knew that there might be savings in the medical insurance. And it turns out that as of Friday, this is after everything happened, we were informed that we did get a savings in our medical, which is certainly helping our discussions tonight, or should help them, God, I hope. And the amount of medical savings due to, and I would add due to our performance the last few years, as well as our due diligence in bidding this out, and not just letting the same company run it. We rebid everything. We did stop loss one year, and then we rebid everything. It resulted in about a $650,000 reduction in the medical insurance. That is something that certainly is helpful for our discussions, and that is something that can be applied for next fiscal year without any ramifications. So it's welcome news. And this is considering, by the way, and I had to write this note, that the medical insurance numbers over recent years have been driving the increases. This is a kind of a, just odd to be hearing that medical has given us savings as opposed to $650,000 in increased cost, which is why some of the budgets have been higher, both on the Board of Education side and the town side. So I wanted to make sure that that was stated. And I do think that that will factor into our discussions tonight. And every member of the Board of Finance was made aware of that so that we were transparent, so everybody knew what the numbers were. So we went into deliberations about reductions that would be encompassed in the discussions. So, okay. I'm going to take another drink of water for anybody else wants to speak.
I would just add that learning this information is helpful because unlike the use of the grant money going into the undesignated fund balance, this money is quite literally a reduction in the amount that we'd have to spend for something that we had budgeted for, as opposed to found money that we weren't expecting to receive. I mean, it's found in the sense that we didn't know what the change was going to be, plus or minus, with regard to the health insurance, and now it's turned out that it's going to cost us less than we thought it was going to, and so that's something that I feel more comfortable giving to the taxpayers than taking money out of the undesignated fund, money that is going to go into the undesignated fund balance, which the size and the strength of our undesignated fund balance has repercussions with regard to what we pay when we go out for bonding, how the rating agencies look at us with our fiscal health, and as we talked about a certain extent earlier, if we take money out of the undesignated fund balance, at some point we have to restore that money to the undesignated fund balance. And when we choose to do that, taking it out looks one way, and when we need to turn it back in, we could be faced with a host of different other issues that we have to decide. And again, I'm unfortunately old enough to recall how we got into a situation where we started taking money out of the undesignated fund balance and not restoring it, and that had a negative impact on the town's fiscal health going back 20 plus years or so. And it took us a while for us to work our way out of that.
We had to create a policy so that rating agencies and auditors and all the other agencies would look at that and say, oh, at least you're doing something about it. Because we got to, I think, 2.5%. And usually you should be somewhere between 10 and 15. And right now we are in that range.
Right.
We are in a comfortable range of a policy that we have set since I've been on the board. I'm just going to put it that way.
And not only did we set the policy, but we followed through on it and making sure we funded it appropriately every year. And so I understand the desire to use that $900,000 to reduce the tax increase to the citizens of the town, ourselves included, but that there are other consequences that need to weigh into the decision as to whether or not to use it for that purpose.
I almost want to say to everyone here and on the screen, and to go to Amy and Jonathan's point, okay, there's this grant money that could push to which could very well will fall to unassigned fund, undesignated, unassigned, rainy day fund, however you want to call it. It could fall to that, and as soon as you use it, the problem is that will everybody here in fiscal year 25, 26, when we go to a vote and we don't have $1 million and we got to find it, will you be okay with a full percentage mill rate increase or well, that's what it'd be. It would be in the mill rate. It wouldn't be in the expenditures.
Restore that money.
And that's what we talk about. That's what we discuss. That's what we have to balance. So it's not just give it. And Jonathan, I always appreciate give it back to the taxpayers. But as soon as you do that, whether it's and I was actually looking at unassigned fund balance this particular budget year simply for the fact to get the mill rate down, because I understood that the voters spoke. But now we know what actual savings are, and now with those savings, where do we want to get the numbers down to, and what more do we feel we need to do based on everything we've seen in the last, we're going on 7 months. So, and that's the discussion that we're having right now.
where do we go from here?
And I also think it's important to note that it's not as though we have never touched the undesignated fund balance. We touched it
We touched it a couple years ago.
during the pandemic.
During COVID, we
To
did- we
use
did-
that.
we went
That's
into it.
what that's what that fund is, in my opinion, therefore, an extreme situation where we need to take steps to minimize the impact on the town citizens and use that money in a way that lessens the impact at a time where there was a great deal of uncertainty as to what the future looked like for the financial health of the town and its residents. And so, but back to the $650,000 offset in the medical cost, that's why, at least from my perspective, it's a different analysis that we take with regard to this news than the grant that was received from the state.
I'll just dive. I don't want anybody to think that the Board of Finance isn't aware of some other things, things that I like to repeat. The population of Guilford hasn't changed in 20 years. We have the same number of people living here. We may have more houses, but we have the same number of people living here. The population has aged. We have different demands. There are fewer students. We understand that. And whenever I hear anybody say, oh, the grand list is up, there's a source of income, I shake my head. Houses don't pay people money. They're not sources of income. They're a source we can't, as a town, tax income. So we're, the pool of goods from which we pull are, to be honest, quite honest, unrecognized capital gains on your property. My taxes went up thousands. I feel it. I know. Now, having said that, so, this is not lost on any of us. But First American Hoy and Chairman Ailes have pointed out this evening that we typically turn in mill rate increases or actual tax increases at or below inflation, CPI. That's through efficiencies, it's through talent, it's through people, making and taking cuts. There have been times when it looks outsized on one side of the table over the other for the reasons given in the year. The discussion at the far end of the table is absolutely correct. We should look at whether you want to call it found money or gifts or whatever else. But then again, the reality is coming back to replace it is not a popular or productive thing to do. In the past, we've taken surpluses, and it's not bad. Typically, if we put down a budget, we come in with a surplus of under 1%. Try and get your household budget to do the same thing any one year. If we get a surplus of under 1%, it goes into the undesignated fund. During the year, we may get something, a request for coastal resilience or something like that, and out it comes for whose benefit? All of ours. And that's just a fact of life. But I'm not ignoring, none of us here are ignoring that the people who we represent who elected us didn't care for the budget. Part of our role here tonight, and every month, and you're all invited to come see us, is to tell you what is going on. At every one of our meetings, the Board of Ed is here, Town Financial Director is here, Town Department heads are here, and you can come and find out what is going on. I think we're going to be looking at some cuts tonight, but you've got to put it in the context of how this all knits together. And I don't know when we want to begin. If anybody wants to start with any numbers, I'll leave it to the chair. But I am very aware, and I'm very suspicious whenever anybody says the grand list has gone up, there's money. It's not money, it's people. It's people that we're serving, and it's people that we ask to share the load. Thank you.
I would just, if I could just add one other thing.
Sure, go ahead.
The other aspect, just to echo what you're saying about and to touch base on the declining enrollment, while the enrollment may have declined, it has declined. There's no arguing that. But the scope of the services that we're providing to our students, particularly following the pandemic, has increased. The cost of special services has gone up in this year's budget, and that's to provide services that we've made it, the town has made a concerted effort over the years to keep more of our students with special needs in district. Mr. Trotta, you've been a big fan of that program because you've seen the tuition line items in our budgets month after month for the students who need to go outside of district, and we do it for the reason that we think it's important to keep our students in district and because we think we can do a good job of educating those students. But those students require the funds to provide them with the services that they need. And sometimes the school district doesn't have the staff to do that, so they engage special services to provide those services. That's why you see that line item go up, because, as Dr. Balistraci pointed out earlier this evening, the ongoing impact of the pandemic on our grade school students and our middle and high school students is ongoing. And it's an experience that none of us had in our lifetimes, and we're all learning what that impact is going to be year over year over year. And we're trying to make up for gaps in socialization, in education, in mental and emotional health. We're trying to do all that stuff and have them advance, and that takes additional resources, and that's a big part of some of the increases that we see in the Board of Education budget. That doesn't mean that we won't look at it, and it doesn't mean that we don't look at it and won't look at it again tonight to see if there's areas where there can be reductions made, but that's part of the increases that you're seeing in the Board of Education budget, in my opinion, but I could be wrong.
No, actually, I'm glad you said that because I wrote it down. That what we've heard over the years, and it was happening before COVID, is a reallocation of funds. So enrollment was going down and it flattened. And what's happened is that, yeah, although the student population may have been down, a lot of times we hear about, a decrease, and I'm speaking for the Board of Education, which I shouldn't do, but if you have a decrease of 30 students in a year or 40 students in a year, that doesn't mean you eliminate a classroom and a teacher. It's spread out over 7 schools. And so what ends up happening is then the tuition costs of special education that we've kept in-house to be able to take the curve that was going 3 million, 4 million, 5 million to go outsource all of these students, which is, by the way, mandated. We can't get out of it. Every school district has to deal with tuition and special education. So we figured, let's keep it in-house. And of course, I'm speaking on board. I didn't do it. It was superintendent, it was Board of Education. It's been something that's been going on for a period of time. COVID certainly, made that, accelerated that, I should say. So we're seeing reallocation of funds. But I go back to my comments before about the 6 years of budgets that were under 2. One of them under 1. So anyway, I'm glad you brought that up.
So I just want to comment on that because, yeah, I was a fan of, having special needs students get services in-house because I was convinced that they were going to try and do it cheaper and it was going to save money for the taxpayer. But now the direction the school's going in, and I've been very blunt about this, I don't appreciate the direction the school's going in.
With special education?
Social emotional learning is not something I think the school should be involved. I think that's something that the parents should be involved in.
Well,
I mean, just like the back of the note calculation, right? I think we have 18 social workers and psychologists. I'm scratching my head about how many appointments elementary school kids have with their, on-site psychologist. I think that costs us about $2 million, roughly, maybe more. I mean, $2 million can pay for an art program. It could pay for world language teachers if we get back to academics. So while I'm a fan of some of the things the school's doing, I don't like the direction the school's going in.
Megan.
Yeah, if I can just speak to that. Well, I wanted to make one point about the population because I know it's been brought up a couple of times. Yes, it's gone down, but I think it is important to note that it's gone down at a it's not gone down as low as we anticipated, and our neighboring towns, they have decreased much faster at a much faster.
You're talking about student enrollment.
Population, student enrollment. Some of our neighboring towns have actually decreased faster, and I do think that speaks to the strong education system we have. We've had people move in over COVID, and then I hear what you're saying, Jonathan, about social emotional, but I think the reality is with the pandemic, there's a whole generation of kids who started learning on a computer and didn't have the skill set or built-in skill set to be able to deal with something like that. And I do think it's part of educating an overall human. You're going to ask them to go out into the workforce. They need to have some sort of social emotional intelligence in order to do that. And I'll just speak from my line of work. In my professional life, I deal with kids all the time that are seeing violence in their homes. They need the schools to be able to show them a good role model. They don't always have it in their home. And so I hear what you're saying about parents, but that's a very privileged outlook because not everybody has a safe home to go to. And so sometimes it's only the school system that they're getting that from. So I do think it's essential. It's been something that the state of Connecticut has adopted in terms of what's essential and critical for school systems to be able to provide to their students. And I do think that's how it's moving in terms of the workforce as well. So to get the next workforce ready, that is a huge skill set that they're going to need to have.
And we're seeing that with the police department wanting to put that same capacity into their force too. So it's on in both budgets.
Agree with me on that.
No, but I just, the reality, I just want people to,
business and stick to.
but sometimes, I would love for that to happen, but the reality is that's not the reality of every kid's life. And they need somewhere to go. And unfortunately, the school system and oftentimes our social services and our police departments are those resources, hence, yeah, the social worker, which I think is great, that connects them to resources. So I think we just have to be cognizant that, yes, parents can play a huge role, but not every child has that in their life. And so the school system is going to be that, whether we personally agree with that or not.
I want to acknowledge the fact that Board Member Veronica Wallace, you came off a mute, and I'm wondering if that's because you wanted to say something while you were on Zoom.
I was just that, but Megan sort of alluded to it as well. You don't forget what we heard from Youth and Family Services. It isn't just in the schools. Youth and Family Services is seeing increased caseload of families and children in crisis. So it isn't just all parents. Sometimes the issues are beyond what parents can do.
Thank you. So, I mean, we could be here all night talking about all the different things we've heard over the last few months, and even history lessons on the budgets. But one of the things I probably would want to at least start for discussion, and it's kind of like to start the discussion. Let's start with a number here.
I have a motion
So,
for a number.
well, I'm gonna continue, and then if you'd like to make a motion after my after where I'm saying. So, as you all know, $300,000 was reduced the first time. I have been looking at the numbers. I also am cognizant of the fact that there's the medical savings, which we now can count on. And so I am not going to make a motion. I'm just going to have this as a discussion that I was looking at about a $900,000 reduction, which would be going 2/3, 1/3 split. Basically, 600 to the Board of Education in a reduction, and 300 to the town, which, and again, I look at the numbers to see where it pans out, to bring us to a mill rate or tax increase that gets under 3. It's 2.94, and a combined budget of 3.2. And you may recall that those were the base numbers I had started looking at for the cost of living and the inflation, and getting the numbers in those types of categories, so that I'm basically indicating that to get to those numbers, we'd have to reduce 900,000, and that's where I would split it. I'd go 600 to the Board of Ed, and go 300 to the town.
Is that using the 650?
That is, yes, that would be, that is inclusive
Okay.
of, yes.
Okay.
That is inclusive of the savings that were found or were shared with the medical. So that's where I'm starting the discussion for, just to let you all know where that numbers look, what those numbers look like with a $900,000 reduction.
That's in addition to the cuts we already made?
Yes, yeah. So the total reduction since day one that we saw these budgets would be 1.2. 300 that we did that went to referendum, and another 9 that we would be going to a second referendum.
But that doesn't include the Board of Ed cuts.
That's 9. No, I'm saying that's 900, 600 to the Board of Education, and 300 to the town.
No, the initial cuts to the Board of Ed.
The initial-
or
the initial-
Board of Ed made. That doesn't include that, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
You know, Mr. Chairman.
I'm simply talking about what the Board of Finance has done and what I'm presenting as numbers tonight.
What's kind of interesting is 300,000 from last time and a potential 900,000 from this time. I don't know if you remember, but I proposed a 1% decrease in the budget at 1.2.
I absolutely recall that.
But I have to say, like,
And can I just add something that
Sure,
I haven't
sure.
said yet, and it'll be very quick?
Mhm.
The majority of this board sent a budget to the voters that we thought was fair and reasonable. And I will personally say I have no regrets, and are not making any excuses for that budget that was sent. Anything from this point forward, I feel, based on what we've been seeing, is going to be, now, I was going to say a hardship. We do know that medical has, helped this discussion, but there are still reductions that are going to have to be made outside of medical. So, my point being, yes, I certainly recall what you had initially said, and
Just odd. Getting you
and the
that.
voters
Yeah.
came out and said something different. And so now we've got to take that in more
But
consideration.
I have to say, since that last meeting,
Yeah.
now I'm aware of $953,000 of extra revenue that's,
Mhm.
I'm going to say falling out of the sky, but, we got it. We didn't expect it. We don't have it budgeted yet. And then I'm realizing that there's also another $200,000 savings between the BOE and the BOS in terms of medical savings. And now I want a motion that the town budget be just held at zero. The town has the money, they have it in their hand. It's time to give the taxpayers a break. And I'll motion that the Board of Education budget be capped at 3%.
Wait a minute, hold on.
Is-
Capping at 3% on the Board of Education.
A 3%
budget.
increase.
And were you also making a motion with the town included in that?
And that the town keep their budget at
Well,
a
that's-
0% increase.
Well, that's part of the motion. That'd have to be part of the motion. I mean,
Yep, that's
yeah,
the motion.
It's one budget, so you'd have to make it as part of the, so 0% increase on the town and 3%
3%
cap
for the-
increase on
for
the
the
Board of
school.
Education.
I don't know what kind of mood your voters are in, but I think that would work for the voters that I heard from. They would feel like that was not a token reduction, but a real reduction. And, I think that many taxpayers are aware that the town has all these funds available to them, and that they can, if the will is there, give the taxpayers a break. That's my
Well,
motion.
hold on, I got it. That, you put that in the form of a motion, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there is a motion on the table. Do I hear a second?
Could you repeat the motion, please, because I could barely hear it?
Jonathan, correct me
Gotta
if I'm
be.
wrong. The motion on the table is to cap the Board of Education budget at 3% increase, and the town budget increase to 0%. Again, I'll call for a second.
It's a rare opportunity to give the taxpayers a break.
Okay. Not hearing a second. The motion on the table fails.
Thank you for hearing me, Mr. Chair.
You're very welcome. Others and their thoughts, because I know we all have opinions on, and again, I'm going to restate what I said before. You all realize this is a balance. We're trying, I didn't second it for the simple reason is I do not feel we can even go close to that. Not with the fact that there are salary increases and there are non-discretionary increases that would be decimated by that kind of a motion. That is my opinion. And
But the revenue's there.
but we talked about that.
But it's one time.
We talked about why I talked about why I and some of us talked about why we wouldn't go there. So that,
And I would be in favor of using the revenue so that we didn't cut the budgets, not to cut them and then also use the revenue. So that's why I didn't second it.
okay. Okay.
I know we have to, I know we're all making cuts tonight. I just think that we have to be like mindful of how we do it. I would rather do like something slowly over time than have this sort of like extreme zero and then next year have to do a 5 or 6. I just think people will forget that and then they'll come back and it'll be a bigger increase and it's less manageable in terms of predictability.
Are you referring specifically to the grant money to use
Yeah.
as revenue? Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that was clear.
I'm not opposed to cuts. I know we have to make them, and I know they're gonna be probably close to $1 million at this point, is what we're looking at, or maybe more. But I just don't wanna use one-time revenue to do that.
Could we use some of it?
I'm
It
okay
doesn't
with
have to be
using some of it,
900,000.
yeah, I think we should use some of it, but I don't know that using all of it is the best long-term
So,
approach.
If we wanted to, again, discussion point, if we were to reduce 900, I'm talking about just tonight. Mary Jane, I know you got the spreadsheet there. If we were to, I am really against unassigned fund balance, but if we were to take unassigned fund balance at $250,000 of unassigned fund balance and take at least some of it, what would that get us? I think I know the number, but I just want you to confirm it. And that's mill rate increase and, well, no, it's just mill rate increase because we wouldn't be going any further in the budgets. I believe that would get the mill rate to 2.7. I'm somewhat guessing because I've done the calcs.
It's
If we were
possible
to-
your I have to add that to my spreadsheet, it's not a calculation, so.
Yeah, no, I know, it's, yeah.
So
If you do it on, it's the same effect if you do it on your revenue.
Go ahead. While Mary Jane is figuring out the numbers, which, I've unfortunately put her under pressure, so.
That would be a total of what?
Well, it's a combination, I think we've talked about this before, it's a combination of reducing the budgets and finding revenue. We did that last time. We reduced the budgets, 200 Board of Ed, 100 to this town, and then we did 300 found revenue that we felt that there were projected revenue that we could add 300,000.
Yeah.
That was the offset to the mill rate. That got us down, but that doesn't touch the budgets. If we were to go with reductions of 900 and find 250 somewhere else, whether it's 250 in reducing budgets or finding it in a revenue source. And again, I am not a fan at all, but 250 is a lot easier to find than $1 million. So I'm stating that for record why I'm even thinking about going there.
Unless we cut the spending by that much.
Unless we cut the spending by that much.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's one or the other.
one or the other.
Because we're at 900 minus 634 is 266, you're bang on it. If you don't want to touch the unassigned balance, and you take 266 or 250 and you cut that
Right.
2/3, 1/3,
Approximately.
we're at $1,000,001, and they're $1,150,000, and I think we were told by the voters who aren't aware that we got, I don't want to call it found money, but unexpected funds, not to spend the unexpected funds, but to drop the budget some. And I think it's important that we show that we heard that, and we think it's smart to work with the town and with the Board of Ed to get that done.
I agree. In looking at the Board of Education's budget, the cost drivers for the existing positions, excluding some that were in the investment positions, those total 3.7%. That's teachers' salaries, negotiated teacher salary increases, expected increased cost of fuel, tuition, contracted services, software, and electricity. Just those alone are a 3.7% increase in the budget, in the Board of Education budget. On the investment side, I mentioned it when we were talking about this last month, I think there's room for some of the positions that are investment positions, which there are some existing school teachers at kindergarten at Lakes, special education at Baldwin, a district-wide social worker, and the school psychiatrist that are already existing in the school district, so they wouldn't be going out and hiring people. But there are some other additional positions that I think, just speaking for myself, I think if we reduce those investment positions by another $300,000 or $200,000 to get the total reduction to 1.1 or 1.2 without dipping into the undesignated fund balance, that would get us down to a number that I think would be responsive to the feedback that we saw at the referendum and make an appreciable reduction in the tax increase in the mill rate. I believe it would be, I haven't done the math entirely, but I would believe it would be under the cost of living increase in inflation rate. So that's what my proposal would be.
It's probably important to just say on record, we actually
Speak-
can't
just make sure you speak up.
We
I just-
can't tell the Board of
can't.
Education.
No,
Just
no,
for
you're
the
okay.
record, yeah.
Veronica just texted me and said, please speak up. I just
So
want to make sure.
Veronica, am I speaking up for you? I think it's just important
tough
for
on
the
Zoom.
public record that we, the Board of Finance, cannot tell the Board of Ed
Very hard.
where to cut. Veronica, I'm just saying for the public record, we, the Board of Finance, can't tell the Board of Ed where to cut the funds from. We can just say it's this amount, but we can't
We can
dictate it.
I
just want people to
You can
understand
mention it,
that.
you just can't dictate it, like you said, you can't.
Right.
Or they decide which lines. to
And
cut
I'm not
after you
telling the
decide.
Board of Education where.
No.
I'm just
no.
identifying where I see that.
Yeah.
I just didn't want it to be
What my thought process was,
misinterpreted
right.
by the public.
Right.
No, no,
Can
no.
we ask the Board of Ed, and I know that you are not the full Board of Ed, so there's no, we can't hold you to anything you're saying, but can you speak to what these numbers we're talking about might do to affect the programming in any fashion?
So what I can say, and I am one of a larger group, so I
Yes,
don't want
yes.
to speak out of turn, we have not discussed, we have not had a meeting where we have discussed any future cuts. We will, we put forth a budget that we thought was quite responsible. And so we will, depending on what the decision is, we will go back and look. But it would be irresponsible of me to guess at where that would be. I'm only one of a group.
And I'll probably get the same answer, but I want to ask the same of the town
Mary
side.
Jo- Yeah, okay. So, go ahead, Mary Jo.
I'd first like to start
Please.
so that you understand the extent of the cut to the town. If you take out the savings on both the Board of Ed and the town side, you're currently looking to cut $155,000 out of the town's operating and only $110,000 out of the Board of Ed. No offense to the Board of Ed, but our operating budget cut is much larger and harder for us to find. So I just wanted to say
Okay.
that.
That's at the 900 level.
Yeah.
That's at the 900 level.
Let's
yes.
be-
Because the savings on-
Which we've currently discussed at the $900 level. So
Yeah.
just wanted to make that clear
Thank you.
that I'm finding a lot more operating cuts at this
Yeah,
point.
let me be clear. The 900,000 was the start of discussion. How we allocate that, I'm just trying to say, if we were to reduce the budgets in whatever allocation it is, 2/3, 1/3, whatever we do, we know that a $900,000 reduction is going to be made up of the savings in the medical and then a split to the town budget and to the Board of Education budget. Is it 600, 300? I mean, we could sit here and we could allocate it and we can do the math. I just threw it out there just to say, okay, this is what a reduction of 900 will do. if we use $250,000 of unassigned fund balance, or we reduce the budgets even more, what would that do? So I'm just presenting scenarios so this board understands, the public understands.
Just wanted to get my
But that-
point out before you make a final
But thank you
decision.
for doing that.
And also clarify, the savings on the medical is 75% on the Board of Ed side, 25% on the town side.
Yeah,
So
it's
that-
basically.
That's why those numbers come out.
It's basically a
They can do
500,
two-thirds.
well, I mean, we all know,
One-third.
it's, I think we do, it's a 500-150 split.
Mr. Chairman, would this
So-
proposed cut be just allocated just in proportion to the budgets?
Oh,
Is that
yeah,
Your
yeah.
vision? Okay.
Yeah, I mean.
It usually makes
here's-
sense to do.
Here's a way of
that.
looking at it. If the board, just one way, Board of Education is, if they're reduced, if it's 500, right, and it's 150, and we're looking at another 250, right, then you do, I mean, if you really want to do two-third one, is that 200, 100? There's a lot of numbers jumbled up here. But what I'm saying is, we're just trying to look at a total reduction to get a mill rate increase down and what the budget number would be combined. To take the Board of Ed budget to 3% is going to be a reduction, if I did the math correctly, we're talking about like an $800,000 reduction alone in the Board of Education budget. And that's, I don't think, including the $500,000 about, that would be in medical. That's in addition to.
You talking about the surplus we're running in medical at the moment? or you talking
No,
about-
what I'm saying is the savings we would receive, or that we have been quoted, because it goes into effect next year. It's above and beyond a medical line item of $500,000 of Board of Ed. I think it's another 800 we'd have to go to get their budget, I think close to 3. It's a big number, whether it's 800, 700, to go to what you were saying before, it's, you know.
Oh, on the
it's-
Board of
it's-
Education budget.
Right.
Yeah, just on the Board of Education, but to get it to 3.
$1 million and change.
To get the town to 0, I'm not even entertaining that. Not even entertaining that.
I find it odd that you can't consider that though, because they have the revenue between the ARPA funds, the medical savings, and this state
I'm not
money
gonna,
that's been
I'm
returned.
not gonna bother repeating myself.
All right.
Thanks.
I've done a little math, just to throw something out on the table. If we begin with 900 that you posed,
Yeah.
and which kind of leaves you, subtract 634 equals 266. If we make that 266, 275,
I got it.
it means a total cut between the two of 1,175,000. So it's under 1.2 million. You can either make that 775 and 400, or I prefer 875 and 300. And that kind of sidesteps touching the rainy day fund. It's a cut in budgets the taxpayers seem to want. We're employing the 634,000 in savings and not going any farther.
634 in savings and then additional
275.
275 on top of the 634?
Yep, so that's 1,175,000 in roundish numbers.
No.
Under 1.2,
1.2, yeah.
beneath.
Regardless, we've got the mill rate under 3, right?
Yep.
That's to me, that's a big number. The only thing is, I'm not a big fan of 1.175. I just read.
I know.
Call
It's
it
a funny-
1.2, divide it, and.
So it's the medical plus another 275, plus where's the difference?
No, plus another 275 beyond that.
Plus another 275.
Right.
So it's the medical plus 275 split between the Board of Ed and town, right?
Yeah.
That's basically what you're saying?
Yes.
But we could do it in a way that.
No, no, no.
Five twice.
Right, it's the medical plus another 500.
Yeah.
So 250.
So
Hold
it's the
on.
900 plus 275, I
550.
think is what he's saying.
Right.
Yeah.
550,
That
I'm
gets
sorry,
you to
Mary Jane, I said
1,
500.
right?
550.
Oh,
I got,
oh, I see. Oh.
yeah.
Oh,
So-
you're saying that's the reduction tonight? No,
I'm
okay.
happy to say you're very busy reducing the budget, but I think we should recognize our
Yeah,
superintendent.
no, I saw your hand go up and I was like, I'm doing math.
Happy to
Okay.
wait, thank you, Joe.
Superintendent Friedman.
I just wanted to note the cost of medical is currently carried in each of the two budgets that we're discussing.
Yeah.
It might just be simpler, as the board has in the past, to make a reduction of a total dollar amount, whether that's 900,000 or 1.2 or 1.75 million, and then assign that 2/3, 1/3 to the two budgets, the way you have historically. And then we could use the monies currently budgeted into our individual budgets for medical as the first layer of reduction, should the Board of Ed choose to begin at that spot, which I'm confident they would.
That's my intention.
That sounds reasonable.
Yep, and that, I think, Mary Jane addresses the concern about the allocation of the savings and making sure that it falls to where it's already budgeted.
Okay.
So could someone work out for me what the net cuts to our operating budget is going to be after you take out the medical? How much are we going to have to take out
I'm trying,
after,
I am
after the
simply,
medical?
what I'm trying to do is I'm just simply trying to round the numbers. We heard about 634, so I'm just basically, based on the allocations, it's
Maybe 166?
approximately $500,000 of Board of Education and medical savings. It's approximately $150,000 in medical savings to the town. So so I'm just rounding it to 650. At that point, if we were to do a $900,000 reduction total, including the 650, bear with
Yep.
me for a second, that's leaving 250 that we would
Right.
divide in a way that could be 1/3, 2/3
Yep.
of that 250.
But if you add,
And then what you're suggesting is adding another, are you suggesting adding more to that?
275.
Another 275.
Which would get you to the 1 million.
275 or 275 plus 275? Bob, I thought said 275.
I'm at $1,175,000 total.
It's from that 900,000.
Right.
Bob,
Yeah.
tell me if I'm wrong. From that 900,000,
Yeah.
add the 275.
Yep.
That gets you to the 1,175,000.
Yep.
If you subtract the 634,
Yep.
you're at 541. Right?
Right.
That's another way to
Of the
do it.
1,175,000, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a 60-40 split.
Yeah.
Yeah.
60-40
Is it?
So it's that 541.
Okay.
So what's the total cut to the Board of Selectmen's budget, please?
You've got the calculator up, go
Yeah,
ahead.
sorry.
And they're again dividing the 541.
2/3, 1/3, or are we dividing the 1.175 by 2/3, 1/3?
I'm doing it old school.
Yeah,
One
are you
favors
doing
one
the
side and one
total,
favors the
or are
other
you
side.
doing the cut? Are you doing the total or the 541? Because it's gonna change the allocation.
So,
I know you do, I know you do.
this, what I come up with, if we take 150 from the town side for the medical cut, right? And if we, just for discussion purposes, the $1,000,001 figure, right? That would make an additional 216,400, splitting it 60/40.
Right.
So the town's, the Board of Education, the Board of Selectmen's cut would be $366,400.
Here's where I'm struggling. I mean, we've got, it's making it more complicated. For anybody in the, I mean, I just would, if it's 1.175, and we do 1.2, and we do 630, 650, we're talking about $550 million.
But remember, the 650, that's not a 60/40 split.
Right, that's where
That's
they
Matt's
wanna know the
question.
allocation. So, yeah, it's
Very,
550.
yeah, I got it.
Could I suggest you just come up with one number and then an allocation?
Well, that's what we're trying to do.
All right.
That's exactly.
That's
what we're trying to do.
you're exactly right, Jonathan, that's what we're trying to do. 550 divided by, no, let's just do it
It's
times 67%. No, right?
500.
Yeah, 368.
Which is why,
So
if
that's
you
so-
take
so-
650, if you do 1,100, 1.1 minus 650, right?
All right, so it's 23 of this 6.50 is 23%. So it's three-quarters, one quarter.
Right.
Right.
If that's, if you're doing 2/3.
On top of the 500.
No, that's a portion of the that's their portion.
Or if you do of the total, it comes out very differently.
Right, so you have to choose which way you want to do it. You can either do it of the 1.2, or you can do it of the 550.
I'm doing it as 550.
Why?
Because well, the 650 is already allocated, 500, 150.
Yeah, but it's
So then-
2/3, 1/3, right?
Right. That's not 2/3, 1/3.
But isn't their medical savings higher than their?
Yes,
medical
that's what I'm
savings?
saying.
Right.
Right, so if,
The original
So-
allocation was 2/3, 1/3 of the budget.
Was there a number you were trying to get to, Bob? No. Or you just? No. The reason I ask is if we start going into
so,
a-
okay.
a number of, let's just, I think, hold on one of my many sheets that I did the math here. If we're-
I'm not the only one.
Yeah, if we're doing a reduction, and I had one, if we reduce a total of 1.15 million, we get the total budget to under 3. If we were to go there, that's a 1.15 reduction, which we know that 1.15 minus the 650 is 500,000 even. If we were to go
To 1.15.
there, which would bring the mill rate down to, it brings both the budget and the mill rate under 3, if we were to go there.
But just,
But that 500
but
would
back to
then,
Matt's question.
yeah,
So 150 of the medical savings is the town side,
I'm doing the math.
Right.
right? 500 is the Board of Education,
Okay, I think I got this, guys.
right?
I think I have this.
All right.
So, okay, can I just, if you do the full 1.2, you break it down 2/3, 1/3. It's
Yes.
804 to the Board of Ed, it's 396 to the town, then subtract the 500 from the Board of Ed, you got 304, and then subtract the 150 from 396, 246.
And
That
we've
doesn't-
somehow rounded up to 1.2.
In all deference to
which-
my friends at the Board of Education, that doesn't work. The way we have it is, you're going to take another 360 from the town's budget. 150 of that is in the medical savings. That means that we have to come up with 210 out of our operating budget. On the Board of Ed side, you're at 815, with 490 coming from the medical, which means they have to come up with another 325 out of their operating budget, if the numbers we heard, which is a 60-40 split, not a 1/3, 2/3 split.
Are you up to 1.2 now?
Yeah, why are we up to
Yeah,
1.2? I don't know why we
was
keep
doing
rounding up.
1.175, so
Okay,
we're doing
I-
at
and-
I
and then-
heard 1.2, so
And then
that's,
1.15 was what you guys were last talking about also, so we've moved around quite a bit.
Can you decide on a
My-
bottom number, and then I can tell you what the numbers are? Sorry.
Yeah, and so, the, hold on, let me find the sheet. Because I had a certain calculation that would show a $1.15 million reduction tonight would bring it, the mill rate to 2.7, the total budget's to 2.98. The split would be, just bear with me, 150 to, and this is just a permeation, 150 that would be medical, another 150 that would be in other categories, for a total reduction on the town of 300. And on the Board of Education, just as an allocation, I had 500 that would come out of medical, and 350 that would come out of any other category, for a total reduction of 850. that is one permeation of it.
Right, so.
So it's eight, so that's getting getting both numbers under 3.
Right, but.
And that, I was gonna say, that to me is the lowest I'm willing to go.
And
I don't wanna go any further than getting that.
So the issue here now becomes.
So how do you allocate it?
Because the savings of the medical side is lopsided. And we've got,
Well, I'm taking $500,000
And we
and
can't
split,
tell them what
and doing,
to do.
and doing it 350, 150. If we wanna go 325, 175, again, it's,
We can't tell
We
them.
can't tell them what to do with it.
I'm not telling them what to do with it, I'm telling
No, we
them
know how the
what the
allocations work.
I'm saying what the reduction.
no, we're applying medical savings that we know.
Right, but we have to reduce,
And then.
we have to reduce by an allocated amount to the town and the Board of Education, so they know what it is.
Which we've always done is 2/3,
Right.
1/3,
Right.
to be fair.
Right.
And so this fairness just happens
So-
to work a little fairer for one side than the other, or,
Yeah.
but.
Yeah,
Why-
I feel like we kind of have to be okay with that,
But the medical is the medical. I don't think you look at 1/3, 2/3 in the medical. The medical savings is the medical savings.
Right.
No.
Flat.
So-
Now you take another additional amount to get a number
And that you do
we're talking, and you
1/3,
take
2/3.
that 1/3, 2/3.
Right.
But we're not voting on medical savings, we're voting on
We're
the
vo-
budget decrease.
Yes,
Right.
but
But that's how we
But we
get
have to, but to come up to the but to come up to the allocation that we want because of the skewing of the medical savings, then we have to come up with a total number that then we say, we are voting to, we're making a motion to reduce the Board of Education budget by X and the town by X, and we know that those include the medical savings.
So,
Right.
Right?
But every other discussion we've ever had that I've been a part of, it's been, hey, the Board of Education budget is 2/3 of the budget, and the Board of Selectmen is 1/3 of the budget. So we should do the increases, we should do the decreases, 2/3, 1/3. Why are we changing that now? Just because we think we know what they're going to do with that money?
no, I think we're changing it
No.
because because the breakdown for the medical cost.
It's the compensation.
Isn't 1/3, 2/3.
It's to compensate for the imbalance, that it's not 1/3, 2/3 on the medical savings.
The Board of Education is taking on 77%
Right.
of that savings, and the town is taking on 23.
There you go.
You know, my motions were much simpler.
Back in the day.
Yeah, how'd they
The
go?
math was
Okay, so
easier.
you're trying to get to 67%.
See-
then. Right, on the.
I'm completely separating, the medical savings is a number we know, and that is not a 2/3, 1/3 split.
Right.
So it's 77, 23. That's it. We know, we've got that. We, great. Okay? Now we take it and say, all right, are we looking at an additional amount? And on that additional amount, we should be looking the historically
Trying to offset it. I
2/3,
get it.
1/3. If it's tweaked $50,000 one way or the other.
I get it.
But what you're looking for is, what are you plugging in? And I'm just for kicks, I'm plugging in a 300 reduction on the town and an 850 to the town. I'm sorry, 300 to the town, 850 on the Board of Education.
What
To
is-
just have that discussion and say, okay, that's your 1.15 million dollars that we're reducing out of the budget to bring the 2.98.
I'm not sure that's fair to the Board of Ed.
In deference to my friends on the other side of the room, that's not fair to the Board of Education.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Just because
So
they're
can I,
saving
can I,
2/3, 1/3.
can I present an option based on your numbers?
You're the
Okay.
finance director.
Okay.
Sure.
So
You've
if-
got all the numbers in front of you.
If we first make the assumption that the Board of Ed is going to get a $500,000 reduction in medical, I know it's a little, the numbers are a little higher than we have, but we're going to take 500,000 on the medical for the Board of Ed
Yeah.
and 150 on the town.
Right.
We're going to take that off the top.
Right.
All right?
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Now you got a difference of 500,000.
Yep.
All right?
1/3, 2/3.
1/3 is $165,000, and 2/3 is $335,000. Making the town's reduction $315,000 and the Board of Ed's $835,000. Are we getting the same numbers across the street?
So close. I was at 75.
Okay.
Again, I'll repeat, how we slice it and dice it hasn't been put in a motion yet. This is why we're discussing it.
That is your
Thank you.
discussion. That is, I am
That-
not presenting that as the option that you do. I'm just putting the numbers in
I-
the right percentage based on what you talked.
So are we at 1.15 now? We went from 1.2 to 1.15.
Yes. To bring the to bring the numbers both on, to bring the numbers both on.
That calculation was based
Right.
on 1.15.
I get, so the
Mr.
calculation you
Mr.
did is based on 1.15. I
Yes.
just want to be clear, we had started with 1.175.
Yeah.
And now we're at 1.15. I just,
The last number given by the chair was 1.15.
It was.
That's the number I've
Yes.
used. I can change my numbers in an instant.
And that's up for discussion if we want to go further, but I want to recognize First Selectman because he is raising his hand.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the effort for fairness here. The reality is, had we had the results of going out to bid and negotiating our health care early enough, those numbers would have been reflected in the budget anyway. So,
right.
The additional cuts at the 1/3, 2/3 level, I think is,
well, it's
traditional. We've been doing it for, since Christ wore knickers.
It's an advantage we didn't have, and by the way, part of this is, again, if it wasn't mentioned, we are one of the first budgets out of the chute. So a lot of towns and a lot of municipalities and boards look at Guilford and say, oh, how'd they do? So guess what? They're looking a little bit because the first one went down. So, what we're doing is we're getting more information, but we get it. We can't get it this early because most of the information we get comes after the budget is approved. And then that's quite a bit of times where there's times that, and I heard the budget, we didn't budget correctly a certain year. There's no such thing as budgeting correctly. We budgeted what we projected and it just ended up that there was more savings or there was more expenditures. It works both ways. So, Mary Jane, yeah, please.
Just to add to that, I'd just like to make it clear that we brought the medical reduction, the medical budget to you the soonest we could. We cannot get the numbers earlier than this.
That's what I'm.
We could not have had them 3 months ago. The way the medical RFPs are done and the marketing, this is the soonest we can have those numbers to you. So I just wanted to make that clear so that
You don't want
people
anyone to think that we were
come
sitting
to
on
you.
the numbers, and we have not
We
been
were-
sitting.
we were not sitting on the
We
numbers.
thought there'd be some savings because we've been doing great performance-wise, because we rebid it and we knew it'd be competitive, but that was, we didn't know what it would be.
Every meeting.
And I
Yeah,
reported
no,
at the last.
Yeah, every meeting.
I
he's
reported
asking.
at the last meeting that we were gonna be meeting to have the final numbers. That
Yeah.
happened to be before the referendum, but not before we had those numbers. I want the public to know.
Yeah, it's
that we
understood.
have
They
come to
came
you as
in
quickly
later
as we
than the
could.
budget process.
That's all I
That's
wanted.
understood.
That's all I
And,
wanted, Mr.
and
Manager.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I also want to credit the Board of Finance, because 2 years ago, when we were looking at our health insurance costs, we had problems with the stop loss, remember? The prices on the stop loss? It was at your instruction that both of us, both entities, went out to the market. We were able to affect the savings in the current budget, the one you set last year at this time, on the stop loss. This time, we were able to combine both of those when we went out to the market, which is why we are seeing what we saw. So this is a culmination of a couple of years' effort to try to drive down the costs on our health care.
In all fairness, it was only a 5-year pattern. The stop loss did us pretty well
prior,
back a few years back. But lately, not so hot.
Not so hot. But now we're seeing a reduction in the rates because we have reduced.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Bob.
Are you willing to accept a motion?
Me and probably everybody else on Zoom and in this room.
I'd like to make the motion that we reduce the combined budget by $1,150,000, split between the Board of Ed, $835,000, the Town of Guilford, $315,000, taking into account health care savings of approximately $634,000 that are split as they are presented.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Further discussion?
I guess I would like to point out that, to the taxpayers, that the town and the Board of Education already has this savings built in for, approximately $650,000 for medical. So really, the only reductions that are being made today are about $165,000 reduction to the town and $335,000 to the Board of Education. So I just wanted to point that out, that that's really the extent of the cut.
And the effect on tax.
But it shows up in your tax bill. But the whole amount shows up in your tax bill.
Yeah.
Yes. It's fair assessment.
Doesn't seem like much.
No.
Well, there was some,
Splitting hairs.
we were fortunate with the health savings this year. We have not been fortunate in the past, so.
I think the voters are expecting more.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, could you repeat louder the numbers for me? Is it 1.15 million?
Yes, 1.15 million total reduction with $835,000 to the Board of Education, $315,000 on the town side. And there is and with the understanding that the medical, Bob, how did you put that again?
Is included as.
Is included in those reductions?
Yeah, in its original.
In their original allocation.
Allocations, that's the
Thank
word.
you,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say,
Careful how you phrase it.
yeah.
For yourselves.
So, all right, if no further discussion, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed?
Any abstentions?
For or against it, sorry to tell you.
She's for.
Sorry, Veronica?
I
Sorry.
oppose.
What's that? I'm
I'm
sorry,
opposed,
you're opposed?
yes.
Okay. 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 That is item number 2. We're on to item number 3, which is public forum. Same rules apply for public forum on number 1. Anybody wishing to address the Board of Finance in person here or on Zoom? Name, address, and 3 minutes. Anyone? Yes, come on up, Dave.
Welcome back, sir.
Dave Holman, 6 Sparrow Bush Lane. The 4.5% on the signs, in the communications, on social media, referred to the operating budgets, all right? When we went to the annual town budget meeting, we could not address the interest or the debt service. That was off the table. The only thing we could address was the operating budget. So, that's what that referred to, and that was pretty much accurate, all right? The second thing is, when you criticize the people who you say were disruptive at the annual town budget meeting, if anybody watched that meeting, they got an eyeful. They saw bullying tactics at that meeting. I went up to Mr. Hoey before the meeting, and I said, I had a nomination for moderator, and he said, okay. And when that meeting started, he recognized Selectman Lou Federici to nominate a moderator. He asked for a second, and then he asked for a voice vote. We were not given the opportunity to nominate a moderator. It got worse. We wanted to have a secret ballot. We were told we couldn't have a secret ballot. We wanted to use Robert's Rules of Order. We were told we couldn't use Robert's Rules of Order. And when we went to discuss the motion to reduce the education budget, they called the question, what is the purpose of a town meeting if there's no discussion? It was a travesty. So for you to criticize the people that were upset at the way the meeting was conducted, that's very disingenuous on your part. Just want to make that clear.
Thank you. Anyone further wishing to address the Board of Finance? Going once? Going twice? Closed. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Thank you for joining.